Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the session on the secret of getting a great appraisal rating. My name is Swapnil Kamat. I am the CEO of Work Better Training, and the real pleasure to be here with you all this Sunday morning. Thank you for being here over the weekend, and thank you for taking the effort to try to get better over every weekend and try to improve your career and life. It's a very, very important thing to do. Before we get started, if you can hear me clearly and if you can see a slide that says the secret of getting a great appraisal rating, give me a big yes in the chat box so I'm clear that you can see and hear me. Okay, so I think most of my friends can hear me and see me. So I'm going to go on with the session. A few ground rules. Most of you all know these things already, so I'm not going to run through them in detail. Microphones, cameras have been put off. Please use the chat box to, if I ask you any questions or if there is any exercise which we have, please use the chat box for that. This session is going to be 90 minutes long. We have at the end of the session, we have something which is called after class, which is exclusively meant to answer your questions for 30 to 45 minutes. I'm going to take questions then. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. Do not put them in the chat box, but put them in the Q&A box. At the end of the session, an assessment link will be shared with you. The participants who score over 70% will get a certificate on this subject, right? So these are just a few of the ground rules, ladies and gentlemen, towards this session. Okay, now let's get to, I've been very excited to start with to conduct this session because I think getting a good performance appraisal is a very important aspect of a person's career if you're working in a company, corporate, startup. But if you are working in a certain setup, which I'm assuming most of you all do, it is very important to kind of understand how to do a performance appraisal well. And also, very strangely, it's not a subject that is discussed very much, right? If you work for a larger company, they won't really teach you or tell you about the secret of how to get a good appraisal, right? They're not going to do that. But it is knowledge that is extremely important for you to kind of succeed in your career, to do well in your career. So I'm so happy to be taking up this subject. And I really hope that there are lots of questions that come up by the end of the session so that you'll are well equipped to deal with your performance appraisal the next time. Okay. Now let's start, my friends, with what is a performance appraisal, right? Traditionally, it was just an evaluation of an employee's performance by his or her manager. However, in modern times, it has evolved into being a discussion for an employee's overall growth and development in the organization, right? So this is something which is true. It's just gone from being an employee's performance related discussion that happens at the end of the year, right? To more about him and how he's going to grow within the organization. The performance appraisal really aims to review, develop, or revise position standards or goals and clarify the organization's expectation from an employee, right? So in simple words, we are talking about the once in a year performance appraisal that will happen, which will determine in a way your rating in most organizations or how have you performed in that year. And often this discussion of performance appraisal, I'm talking about the once a year discussion that you have, and more often than not, this once a year discussion will also determine salary increments. This will also determine the promotions you get. This may also determine the responsibilities that you get from your organization. So I hope you understand the criticality of this thing, right? This once a year discussion will have so much of an impact on your career. And while researching on this topic, I was just reading reading this article that said that if, even if you can kind of extract, and if you can, because of doing a good performance appraisal every year on year, if you can get, say, even a slightly better increment on your existing salary, even if you can get that slightly better increment over a period of time, that will compound to become a very, very big amount, right? So I'm just taking the component of salary, but it ends up determining so much in terms of where and what you're going to do in your organization for the rest of the year, right? So do you all agree that the performance appraisals are very, very, very important to your career? If you agree with it, give me a big yes in the chat box, so that I know that you're here in mind, body, soul, everything during this session. Yeah, good, good, good. I'm getting a lots of yeses. Okay. I just want to kind of reiterate here. I just want to reiterate that when we're talking of performance appraisal, we are not talking about, we're not talking about the day-to-day feedback sessions that you may have with your manager. We are just talking about the once a year performance appraisal kind of meeting discussion that you'll end up having with them, right? That's what the topic is about today. Okay, now I want your opinion on this, right? And I want you all to use the chat box to give me some answers. Why are performance appraisals so important? What's your opinion on this? And I want each one of you all to give me three points, and please put them in the chat box. And of course, when you're replying, just reply. When you're typing the message, make it to the panelists and attendees, so the rest of the people attending can also see the answers that you've put in, right? So please give your answers in the chat box. Selva Ganesh has written some very nice answers. He says for introspection, for career growth, for monetary benefits. You're right. Raju, I'm not asking what it should be. I'm asking why is it important to you, right? That's what I'm asking here. Okay, so Deepu J says to meet the employee and employer expectation, to motivate employees and aim for career progression. Jai Krishna says to rate the employees, to groom him or her for better future, to assign suitable roles to them. Bindu NV, to know where we stand, our strengths and weaknesses, we can improve our performance for career growth. Yes, Om Vilas Rao says to motivate employees. Okay. Now, again, this entire session, ladies and gentlemen, is from the point of view of the person that is being appraised, right? We are not taking this point of view on if you are a leader, how should you conduct an appraisal? No, we are talking about when you are reporting into somebody, how do you conduct yourself very well when you are being appraised as against you appraising someone else, right? So what you need to do while giving feedback, what you need to do, we will cover in the leadership topics and stuff like that. But today it's all about how do you get a great performance appraisal, right? Okay, Lakshmi Pati says to improve our efficiency to do business, how we have performed during the year, whether we meet our organized expectations. Shanavas says decide salary increment to help me understand what the expectations of my managers are, how I can achieve my improvement area. Some very, very, very good answers. I think everybody is very active on this Sunday morning today. Their brains are working overtime. I'm very happy. Good. Thank you very much for participating. Now, let's see. I think this basically summarizes a lot of stuff that you'll have said already. Okay, why are performance appraisals so important? Number one, they are important so you can identify the potential discrepancies or differences between yours and your manager's perception of your performance, right? You can see whether there is a gap between it or you are on the same page about how you are going about performing, right? The second point is to understand, you will understand your KPIs. I hope all of you all know what KPIs stand for. KPIs means your key performance indicators, to understand them very, very clearly, because at the end of the year, you are going to get judged, assessed on how you are doing on those KPIs or those key performance indicators. In a lot of companies, those KPIs are chalked out very, very clearly. In slightly more mature organizations, there's a lot of clarity on what those KPIs are. Often in younger organizations and a lot of other organizations, these KPIs are not that clearly indicated, but we will of course get into a discussion of what you need to do in a situation where they are not that clearly indicated. The performance appraisal will serve as a foundation for your promotion, salary raise, okay, or extension of your contract. And you will understand your contribution in the organization's overall growth, right? So all of us know that the performance appraisal is a very, very, very important discussion that we really need to learn how to master. And hopefully today's session gives you some clarity on how to go about mastering it, right? So that's our whole point of view here. Now, okay, so this discussion that we're going to have is going to have two broad parts, and I'm going to use my drawing skills to show you the two broad parts of this discussion are going to be: number one, what do you do through the year, right? So this is one very important part if you want to get a great appraisal. So what do you do through the year is something that you need to think about. And number two, you need to think about, okay, you need to think about how do you conduct the performance appraisal itself, right? Because if both these things are important in the end for you to get a great performance appraisal, okay, I repeat. So there are two broad parts to this entire discussion. One broad part of it is, what do I do through the year, okay, so that I get a great performance appraisal? And number two, how do I actually go about conducting this particular performance appraisal that can benefit me, right? So if you do a combination of these two things right, that is when you will get the result that you want of getting a great appraisal, right? This is when you get your result. Now, a lot of people do this part well, which is through the year, they do what they're supposed to do, but they are terrible at doing this part, right? And a lot of people do the bang opposite. They do this part badly, but they're often good at doing this part well, right? And I can assure you that over a period of time, if you want to do well in your career, you need to be able to do both these things well for you to see a productive and a good result for yourself, right? Okay, so these are the two things that we're going to contribute. Now, we will discuss this thing first, and then we will discuss this thing second, right? In our way of going about it, right? Now, first, let's discuss what do you need to do through the year. Okay, and I want you all to quickly read through this thing, and then I'm going to explain this thing to you, right? I'll give you a minute for you to go through it and absorb it, and then we will discuss it. Okay, now, I hope you've read this. If you don't do these 3 points mentioned, and by the way, these are 3 points mentioned because we just have 90 minutes on our hand, right? We don't have too much of time. We could probably extend each one of these points into doing a whole session in itself, into each one of these points. These are very, very big points. These are 3 of many points. I just identified what are the most important points, but I can assure you that if you don't do these 3 things right, no matter how much you try to ace the discussion in the end, it's not going to be of much use. But if you do these 3 things right, And along with that, learn how to do the performance appraisal very well. That is the magic combination you need to look for, right? So perform well and have the discussion well. Okay, so now let's look at these points one by one. This is my number one always, right? For those of you who have been around in the club and attended a few of my sessions, this is the one thing that I talk about. Anybody asks me the question, how do I do well in my career? And this is my, if I have to give you one line answer, this is what I'll say. I'll say deliver 120% of your key performance parameters consistently, right? That's the most important thing, of consistently delivering results for this. That's all that it means, right? Consistently delivering results for your organization, right? And if you do that month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year, you become valuable to the marketplace. If you don't deliver the results on your key performance parameters consistently, that is when all the problems start happening, right? And this is the second point that I keep sharing. If you want to do well in your career, you need to be in the top 10 of performers that are there, right? Now this could, if you have a very large organization, it could be within your department, right? If it's a smaller company, it could be within your company, right? Entire company. But this is what you need to aim for. You need to aim for being in the top 10 of the performers which are there in that setup, right? And that's when you know you're really doing well. Okay. And the minute that starts happening, you become valuable to the marketplace. Okay. Now let me kind of throw some light on this one. Know all your performance parameters. Now this is a big mistake that people happen. So I'm going to take a blank slide and kind of explain what this means, right? Of what, know all your performance parameters. If you want to perform well, you need to know each one of them. Okay. Now I'll give you an example of salespeople, because very important, their performance parameters are very quantitative. So it's very easy for them and the rest of the organization to know whether they're doing well or not doing well. Okay. The main parameter, which is, say, there for a business development team or a sales team, is their annual target, right? Okay, is their annual target, which again is then broken down into a quarterly target and a monthly target, and then they have these figures, right? But they have an annual target. Now let's assume that the annual target that needs to be achieved by a sales team is 1,000, right? So this is what I keep saying. If the target is 1,000, you need to, at the end of the achieve rupees 1,000, 1,200. That's what you need to aim at achieving. And this 1,200 should put you in the top 10% of performers in the sales team, right? So this is what you need to do. Now, okay, I'm repeating this thing. So this is the main parameter which is there. However, what a lot of people don't realize is that there are a lot of other parameters which they tend to forget, right? And they just concentrate and possibly meet this parameter, but they're not even really aware of all the other parameters, and they don't end up meeting it. For example, number 2, an important parameter could be profitability, right? Or what margins are you doing business at, right? So it's not just about achieving this 1,000 rupees a year, it's also doing it at the right kind of margins. Number 3, they could be payment collection terms, right? Which means that, okay, you know, the payment needs to be collected within 30 to 45 days, right? That's very important. Now, if your client is not paying for up to 90 days, when this is the parameter set, you are not doing as well as you need to be. Number 4, you could have another parameter which is on what you call it, delivery cycles, okay, or payment terms. Okay, that could be another payment terms, and you need to say, okay, I need to get this 50% advance before we do business, so on and so forth, right? Now, the mistake that a lot of people make is that they only concentrate on the main parameter which is there, and they often forget to concentrate on all the other parameters that are important to the company, right? And the difference often between the top performers, the people that are actually in that 10%, they identify each one of the key result areas that are required by the company. They know that this is the main one, Okay, they're very aware of what is that main factor that they need to chase, but they also know each one of the performance kind of indicators that are expected from them, and they really focus in a concrete way on each one of their parameters, right, which are there. And that is what kind of tends to make them a super success within the organization, right? And this is what I've seen is a big difference. Okay, now let me give you another example. In most jobs, this is what happens, right? Somebody say is into software programming or coding, right? So there are lots of different parameters on which you're going to be judged, right? So probably one of your jobs will be to, if it's to write software, right? So writing software, how you go about doing that, that could be one important indicator. But maybe another big important indicator of a big parameter is to say, what is the customer satisfaction score, right? And with your customers, maybe you need to get, I'm just giving a rating there, right? Maybe you need to get a 4 on 5 with all your customers. So that is one indicator which is there, which is very important. Another indicator could be, say, what ratings your peers or subordinates give you, right? That could be another indicator of this, right? So if you just think that writing good software code or coding well is the main parameter, and if you just focus on this and do not focus on the rest of the things that are important, at the end of the year, you won't get the kind of appraisal that you are looking for, because you have conveniently ignored a lot of parameters that are important for success, as your boss would see it or as your company would see it. And then you would have a lot of your colleagues, a lot of your peers that would concentrate on each one of those things, and in turn make a success out of it. For those of you that have children, let me give you a parallel in terms of that, right? Let's assume you have a child and your child loves maths, right? He loves maths and he gets 90 out of 100 on maths, right? But he has 6 other subjects, right? He has 6 other subjects and he tends to ignore, okay? He tends to ignore Hindi, in which he gets 25 out of 100, right? He doesn't, because he doesn't like Hindi as a subject, right? He doesn't like languages. So he says, okay, 25 out of 100. But this doesn't really help, right? Because maybe he's going to fail the year if he failed in Hindi. In spite of getting 90 on 100 in maths, he'll still end up failing the year, or he'll still have a bad percentage overall. And this is what a lot of people tend to do. And this is what leads to their failure, right? So again, coming back to this thing, number one thing to keep in mind is, please deliver 120% on your key performance parameter consistently. Number two, know all your performance parameters. Don't just concentrate on the main or one of them, or the one that you really like, or the one that you think are important. You need to go through all of them and perform on each one of them. And of course, as a result of that, be in the top 10 performers of your company, right? Be one of those people that are at the top of their game, not people that are just struggling within the organization. Okay, now, the second thing to focus on, right, is take ownership and responsibility. Okay, now, if you want to do well in your organization, if you want to get a great performance appraisal, the basic thought is, take the headache off your boss's head. Okay, that's what you need to do if you want to get a great performance appraisal. Now, what does this mean? Take the headache off your boss's head. It means something very simple. It means that when your boss delegates a task to you, or when your boss gives you a particular task or project, your boss needs to feel, I'll say this in Hindi and English, okay, the boss needs to feel कि मैंने अगर इसको ये काम दे दिया ना, तो ये काम हो गया. Which means if I, this subordinate of mine, this subordinate will put heaven and earth together. I repeat, the subordinate will put heaven and earth together to ensure that this particular task, project, or job gets done, right? He takes the headache off my head. And the minute you start doing that, of taking the headache off your boss's head or your customer's head, that is when you are going to start making progress. Now, let me tell you the flip side of this entire thing. If you are the kind of person that when your boss gives you a job, your boss has a bigger headache and feels that if I'd done this job myself, it would have been better. Giving it to this person is a bigger headache than doing it myself. If that is the feeling that you give your job or your client or anyone, you are unlikely to get a great appraisal at the end of the year, right? With that feeling. And this is a feeling that you give your boss, right? And where does that feeling come from? That feeling comes from a reality. The reality of how you've been performing is built over a period of time. And now your boss has a very strong perception of you, and where he feels the headache. And just trust me when I say that the boss does not want to feel the headache, right? If he feels the headache, it's not because something is wrong with him. He does not want to feel the headache. His ideal situation is that you do the work and he gets all the credit. That's what his ideal situation is, right? That he sits at home, all the numbers get done, he's chilled out, right? And he can take the credit for making the team work well. That's his ideal case situation. So if he's feeling it, oh, you cannot say that he just feels it and I have not done anything towards it, right? So ensure that you take the headache of your boss's head. That's something which is very important. Now, the second thing which is very important, and I'll draw slightly here, I'll use this, is a start to finish mentality. Okay, this is what I keep sharing with people. It's a very important trick of getting a great appraisal. If you don't do this, oh my God, there is no way you can get a good appraisal, right? So let me use this slide to help you understand what I'm trying to say. Okay. Yes. Start. Okay. Start to finish. Okay. Now, this is an example that I've been giving for years. It's an example on somebody in my company, right? So there was this gentleman that, of course, still works with us. And I'll tell you the short story of this thing because we just have 90 minutes, right? So he had a project, and I delegated a project to him, which was we used to give, and we still give, Diwali gifts to our corporate clients, right? We give Diwali gifts every year to them. So I had delegated this project of giving Diwali gifts to a certain gentleman within my organization. Okay. Now, so this was the starting point where I delegated giving Diwali gifts to him. So the end point of this activity is that my clients get the gift, okay, and they are delighted with it, right? This is my end objective that I shared with you. I said that I want the clients to get the gift and I want them to be delighted with that gift. I want them to really love the gift that we have sent, right? Now, so this is the end of it. Now, this gentleman, he worked very hard. He put in, okay, let's assume that this entire project is a 100-hour project, right? This entire project is a 100-hour project. Now, what happened is this gentleman started putting a lot of work in this project, started researching, started speaking to a lot of vendors, started doing all the things that you need to do, right, to ensure that you get this Diwali gift. But so he put close to he finished the project 70%, right? Now, all that had to happen was he had to order the gifts and they need to be couriered. So he finished this project 70%. So let's assume that he took 70 hours, okay, of this time. But by the time he took these 70 hours or 70% of the job was done, he realized that if I have to actually now order and send the gifts across, they will be late by 10 to 15 days after Diwali is when these kind of gifts would reach them, right? And that's kind of useless to get a gift 15 days after Diwali is over, right? Now, look at what has happened and look at how this is going to impact your appraisal in a way. You have spent 70 hours on something, but have not got any end result out of it, right? So you worked very hard and you spent 70 hours, but these 70 hours that you spent here is a total waste of time. The only thing that you can say you can draw out of this, if you use it well the next time, is some kind of learning from your failure, right? That's what you can kind of learn from it. But otherwise, the 70 percent of the time, or 70 hours that you spend on this project, which didn't come to fruition, which didn't get you the end result, is a major waste of time, right? And throughout the year, if you indulge in a lot of activities or a lot of projects where you start them but don't take them to their logical conclusion, or you don't take them to their finish mark, and you spend a lot of time on those projects, at the end of the year, you will have worked very hard, but you will have nothing to show. Because if I ask that team member of mine, or if I ask that subordinate of mine at the end of the year, saying, what are all the activities you did, or what were your big contributions? So this person used to work in a marketing role back then, right? So, and if I ask them saying, what are all the tasks that you did, or what are all the projects that you did? He can't come and tell me saying that, listen, I worked very hard on trying to send the Diwali gift across to people, right? That's not a good answer to get a good appraisal, right? The only answer is that, okay, you know what? We actually sent these things to our clients and our clients absolutely love them, right? Does that make sense to you? The start to finish mentality. And this is where so many of us, that's why we end up getting a poor appraisal, because we're just indulging in activities that don't give us an end result. And then we have nothing to show at the end of the year. Okay. So if you are understanding what I am saying, if you follow what I'm trying to say, give me a big yes in the chat box. So I'm sure that we're on the same page as far as this is concerned. Does that make sense to you? Is a good way to look at stuff? Okay. So what is my advice to y'all as a result of this start to finish mentality, which is there, right? What is my advice to you to get a great appraisal at the end? My advice to you is very simple. My advice to you is be very careful while taking or starting any task or project, right? Give it a lot of thought whether that project is important to you, your department, to your company. So give that a lot of thought, okay? Actually think, if this project goes successful, how will it really help me, my department, my boss, my company? You need to give it a lot of thought. And this is where a lot of us get it wrong. In our time management session, I discussed the topic of time leveraging, which meant using your time in a way that gives you the maximum return, right? So this is one of the concepts. So before you start any task, activity, project, job, think very hard about whether that thing is actually important or not, and whether, if it's done well, whether it is going to actually help your company. If the answer to that is a yes, then ensure that you take it from start to finish, right? Otherwise, don't start the project at all, right? Because the minute you start the project and you take a certain amount of time on it, your time is gone, but you have nothing to show at the end of the year. You have nothing to show at the end of the year. Your boss, your super boss are not really going to care about how you spend those 70 hours, right? What they want in the end, what is the result of those 70 hours or 70% of the work that is done, right? In organizations, people rarely judge you by the efforts. People don't have the time to judge you by the efforts. They are always going to try to judge you by the results that you get of it, right? So in time management sessions that I like talk about more often than not, I say that people don't care about how you spend your time. People care about the results that you get from them, right? So tomorrow, if you can get the 120% the result that you want consistently, and you just need to spend 4 or 5 hours doing it, nobody is going to care as long as you get the 120% of the result, right? So this is the concept of start to finish that you need to keep in mind to get a good appraisal, right? Now, the last thing that you need to do in the ownership and responsibility point is think ahead, right? So be proactive in your thinking and think ahead, which means that if you're working on a certain project, think of all the possible problems that could happen. Think of all the possible hindrances that could be there. Think of all the things that could go wrong in that thing. And do not expect, in a way, your boss or your client who is dealing with you to kind of babysit you, right? Do not do that. Okay. So do not expect that to happen. Okay, so think ahead in terms of being proactive in your thinking, right? Ensure that you're doing that, and do not wait for your boss to kind of babysit you, or just give you everything on a platter in a way. Now, the third point is, what do you do through the year? Ensure that you treat your boss like your number one customer, right? For those of you all who have been through our how to deal with your boss session, how to manage your boss session, this is the first point that you share, and this is exactly what you need to do through the year, right? If you want to get that good appraisal, you need to treat your boss like your number one customer, right? And your job from today onwards is not just to satisfy your customer. Your job is to delight your customer, right? And that's what you need to do, because your boss again is your number one customer. You need to understand that if you cannot even delight your boss, you are possibly not going to be able to delight any other internal or external customer. If you cannot delight your internal or external customers, you're not very likely to do well in your career, right? So you need to treat your boss like your number one customer. Now, how do you go about doing that? Again, you need to understand their preferences and work according to that, right? You need to do this throughout the year. You need to understand what your boss's expectations are, what his preferences are, how he likes stuff to be given to him, how he likes you to kind of present certain information across. You really need to study your boss like you would study a customer, right? You really need to do that. You need to look for the patterns that your boss, apart from past patterns, you need to look at the trends that are there of what his expectations and preferences are, and then you need to work and deal with your boss accordingly. And more often than not, this is what I tell people: this one thing of not understanding how to deal with your boss, because we have branded our boss as the enemy, right? We've branded our bosses as the enemy. Our inability to really work well with our bosses often ends up being the reason why we don't get an appraisal which is as good as what we want, right? And here, of course, I'm not talking about just sucking up to your boss or just doing chaprusy, as they call it in Hindi. You don't need to do that if you're going to do a lot of other things right? That's not what we're talking about. But you really need to understand their preferences. You need to know what their expectations are and work accordingly. And the last point here, this is, of course, this is the last point only because we have 90 minutes. I'm just trying to tell you the most important things that are there. And the last thing that you need to do if you want to get a good appraisal is ensure that you are a reliable and trustworthy, okay, a reliable and trustworthy kind of partner to your boss, right? And this largely revolves around your ability to kind of stick to commitment. How do you build trust or reliability, right, in yourself? How do you do that? There's a very simple principle of saying that whenever your boss whenever you give a commitment to your boss, whether it's a big commitment or a small commitment, you actually deliver on that commitment, right? And the more and more and more you actually start delivering on those commitments to your boss will start trusting you a lot more. And the minute you become an indispensable resource to him, he or she is likely to give you a good appraisal, right? Because they will give you the best appraisal possible when you become indispensable to them or the department. They will give you the best appraisal, because I think a good way to look at stuff is most people operate in their own self-interest, right? I repeat, most people tend to operate in their own self-interest first, right? Now, if you are a trustworthy, reliable person in your boss's team, who delivers 120% on the results that are required, in a way, you become an asset for your boss, right? You become an asset for the management. And the minute you become that asset for the management or your boss, he doesn't want to let you go. And therefore, he will give you the best appraisal that is there. But if you are not that asset for him, that's where it starts becoming a problem. Right now, a lot of y'all may have questions saying that, oh, I am so good that my boss is threatened by me, right? I'm not saying that's not possible. That is possible, that you could be so good that your boss could possibly get threatened by you. There is every chance that that will happen. But in my experience of dealing with in the corporate world, I've realized that 8 out of 10 times that is not true, right? That 8 out of 10 times it's not the case where the boss is threatened by his subordinate or anything of that sort. It's just that the subordinate often not is extra smart and he thinks no end of himself, and he has a larger self-image about himself, and he thinks that his boss is threatened by him because he's too good, right? But in my experience, 8 out of 10 times that is just untrue, right? Yeah. So this is the first, like I said, this thing is divided into two parts. This is the first kind of area that you need to focus on. Number one, be the performer that delivers on 120%. Be a performer that knows all the parameters on which he's going to be judged by, right? And ensure that you're within the top 10% of the performers in your company. If you don't do this point, the first point, nothing else is going to help you in your performance appraisal. Number two, be the kind of person that takes ownership and responsibility of your work, right? The minute you take ownership and responsibility of your work, that is something which is going to help you. Ensure that you're the kind of person that takes the headache of your bosses or customers' head. Have a start to finish mentality. I don't want you to be in a situation where you worked on 10 projects, but all of them were just 80% complete, right? But you worked very hard on 10 projects, all of them 80% complete. You are going to have nothing to show at the end of the year as something that you achieved, right? So that's not what you want to do. You want to ensure that you could probably work on 5 projects, but have them 100% complete instead of working on 8 of them and 10 of them and having them 80% complete, right? Because you need something to show at the end of the year. So ensure that you operate on that start to finish mentality, which is so important, and ensure that you're taking ownership by thinking ahead, right? So I usually call it thinking ahead and thinking strategically, both. Right? Thinking strategically means looking at stuff from a 360-degree point of view, thinking of all the angles connected to what you're doing, and also thinking ahead in terms of what could possibly go wrong, what would happen as a result of that, and not expect to be spoon-fed by your boss or customer, right? And then the third point, treat your boss like your number one customer. If that's not going to happen, nothing else is going to work, right? And I've just shared, delight him, understand his preferences, and be a reliable and trustworthy person to him. Okay. If you are clear on these points, these 3 points, and understand the importance of them, please give me a big yes before we go to the next part of how to deal with the actual performance appraisal. Go for it. Give me a big yes. I want another big yes from all of y'all if you're actually going to start focusing on each one of these things. Give me another big yes if you're actually going to start focusing on these things. Okay, thank you. I think all of us are in line. Okay, now before I go on to the next part, guys, get a good performance appraisal. Yeah, do well in your career. Be the top 10 performers in your department or your company. It has an amazing impact on yourself. It will have an amazing impact on your family. It will have an amazing impact on your department. It will have an amazing impact on your company. It will have an amazing impact on the customers that you deal with, and have an amazing impact on the country at large, right? Each one of us don't need to be in the Indian army to contribute to the country, right? If you are doing a good job, giving good services, creating jobs for other people as a result of it, that's a great contribution to other people. Yeah, doing your job well is an amazing contribution that you can make to every stakeholder, and you can create a real win-win situation for them, right? A lot of times, correct me if I'm wrong, for those of you all especially that have children that go to school, a lot of times we expect our children to do very well at their school. We expect them to do well in different activities that they indulge in, right? We expect them to have an attitude of giving it their best, of doing all these things. We have all these expectations of our children, but in a way we've stopped having these expectations from ourselves, right? And the minute you become one of those top 10 performers in your setup, in your company, you get good appraisals, you're doing well in your career, you are okay. Vijay, I'm not clear about why the output is poor. Can everybody hear me clearly? Hello, can everybody hear me clearly? Okay, I think most people can hear me clearly. Okay, so I have a mixed bag of people saying they can hear me clearly and not. So I don't think the problem is from my end, at least currently. So yeah, so for those of you all who can't hear me clearly, I guess it is more your connection than my connection, because again it's 50-50. So I'm not sure. I'll hold this closer to my mouth to ensure that that I am more audible and I'm more clear. So I'll do my best. Okay, now okay, some issue. Okay, good, thank you very much. Please, if there are any issues, just bring them up, that really helps. Okay, so I'll keep this closer to my mouth to ensure that you all can hear me even more clearly. Okay, yeah, so like I was saying, I think it's very important that especially if you have kids, that you kind of set an example to them, not through words, but by actions, right? And exactly how we would expect them to give their best at what they're doing. I think it's very important for us to give our best to what we're doing, right? And giving our best to what we're doing doesn't necessarily say, oh, but I worked very hard. If you're going to work very hard but not do start to finish, right, that hard work doesn't really pay. That hard work doesn't count. You need to ensure that you're doing hard work and also very smart work, right? So you need to be able to do both things. If you're not going to do the smart work as much as you're doing hard work, in the end it's not going to pay for you. In the end it's not going to really help you, and you need to be able to do that, right? The other thing that I just wanted to say here before I get to the actual, like what to do, like for the appraisal, that particular meeting, listen, somebody in your company is going to get the best appraisal. It may as well be you, right? So it's not like that great appraisal is not going to be given to somebody, but in most companies that I know, they follow some version of the bell curve, right? And what does the bell curve essentially mean, right? The bell curve basically means that only probably 10% of people can get a 5 on 5 rating. The majority of people will get something from 3 to, I don't know, 2 to 4 rating. And then, this 1% will get, right? But there are restrictions in each and every company on the amount of people that can be within this top 10, right? So it's not like the company can just give it to anyone. So getting that good appraisal is a highly competitive process, right? So please don't be mistaken that it's not a competitive process. It is a highly competitive process, right? Just like standing in the first 3 in your classroom is, or a race or anything is a highly competitive process. This is exactly the same thing. So therefore, you need to work both smart plus hard for it, right? You need to be able to do both if you want to be in that top 10%. But listen, being in that top 10% is a beautiful feeling, right? Because if you're going to work so hard and then not be able to get the result that you want at the end in terms of your own appraisal, my God, isn't that a waste, right? And that's exactly why I'm trying to conduct this session, to throw some light on this subject, right? Okay, so on that note, now let's go to the next thing. The next part is, how do you conduct the actual meeting, right? What do you need to do to conduct the actual meeting that happens? So let's get into the typical format that we follow of the big 3 or the big 5. So let's look at what our big 3 is here. So we've kind of broken up this segment of how to conduct the meeting into the big 3, which is before the performance appraisal, number 2 during the performance appraisal, and number 3 after the performance appraisal, right? So that's how we've divided it for you right now. What do we do before the performance appraisal, right? Let's kind of look into that. Okay, now I think these are some good points, right? Number 1, do a monthly self-evaluation on the parameters used during performance reviews. Okay, now look at this thing. Getting a better salary, getting a good increment, getting a good promotion, getting a good job profile, getting the right responsibilities within your organization is supremely important to each one of us. Yet, in my experience, and I have by now conducted loads of performance appraisals myself as a boss to other people, right? So I've done this myself. And just trust me when I say this to you, that in my experience, not even 10% of the people conduct this particular performance appraisal discussion well, right? And one of the reasons why they don't conduct it well is because they do not focus on the first two parameters, right? I have 3 points here, but the first two parameters, they do not focus on them. In spite of the importance of the performance appraisal in a person's life, they do not focus on self-evaluating themselves every month on the parameters that are set by you. Your boss is not going, a lot of companies have quarterly appraisal, some like a mini appraisal that happens, or a biannually appraisal. But of course, the main appraisal is the one where you get your actual end of the year rating, promotion, all those things that happen, right? As a result of that. You're not going to prepare yourself well for that, right? And in my experience, 90% of people don't. I'm serious about it, right? Now, so ensure that you monthly self-evaluate yourself. Number two, prepare well. Oh my God, this is so important. Keep an evaluation file throughout the year. What does that mean? You need to create your own file of all the good things, okay, broadly, all the good things that you're doing through the year, all your achievements, all your projects. You need to keep your own file, right? And the minute you keep your own file and you're clear on exactly what you've done through the year, and if you have it in writing, you have it saved, you have a file that you've created, right? That is the kind of paper that you need to enter your performance appraisal meetings with. That particular file of saying, this is exactly what I've done through the year, right? These are my achievements. So it in a way needs to be exactly like a job interview. If you're going for a job interview, I am assuming you go with your CV and you go with a bunch of other things that you have done in your career so far. And if you actually have a file that is there that you go, I hope that's how you go for your job interviews, right? Of all your achievements of everything. That is the exact kind of preparation that is required when you're going for a performance appraisal. Equate a performance appraisal like going for a job interview, right? It will really end up helping you. Okay, now for a lot of us who are not into the habit of doing this, so this needs to be done in an ongoing basis, right? And what do I mean by an ongoing basis? You need to do this all the time, right? That you keep adding to the stuff depending on what you're doing through the year, because it's so difficult for a person to remember at the end of the year. However, if you don't end up keeping this kind of file, a good idea before of preparing for the performance appraisal before you go for it is, if you haven't done this, is to go back through your calendar, right? Look at your diaries, look at your meetings, and that will look at your email, and that will remind you of all the projects you've taken up, all the work that you've done through the year, right? So ideally, do not wait for the end of the year and then check your emails and calendar for it. Do this in real time as the year is passing by. But in case you haven't done it, okay, ensure that you go, a good idea is to go through your email, go through your calendar, and that will rejig your memory, rejig your brain, will help you remember all the stuff that you've done and put together, right? So that's one way in which you need to prepare. Now, the second, if your company uses a self-appraisal form, which a lot of companies, including mine, does, get hold of the form well in advance. I'm going to go mad trying to explain this thing, okay? I've seen hundreds of these forms. People do such a poor job in filling up their own self-appraisal form. They do a terrible job. and they say a lot of rubbish connected to it, which I absolutely never understand. One of the things that people say, which is, I find it like it literally, I find it so annoying because I've seen it so much. The company has given you a self-appraisal form for you to fill it first, right? So they expect you to talk about what have you achieved, what have you done, what are the projects you worked on, what you think you've done well, da, 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 da. They expect you to put it down there. A lot of people come to me and say, sir, मैं खुद के बारे में ऐसे कैसे लिखूं, मुझे ठीक नहीं लग रहा है खुद के बारे में लिखने के लिए. That means I'm not feeling correct to write about my own achievements, my own accomplishments, the work that I've done. I'm not feeling good about it. Arey, this is not about you feeling good about it or bad about it, right? Your company has actually given you a form and said, please fill the form. Do it well. And then you're going to take that form and create some rubbish in your head around it. So the forms that typically come in to me, 90% of the self-appraisal forms are so poorly filled because they'll say that, oh, you know, either they've been lazy about it because they don't really remember what all they've done through the year. So they're lazy about their accomplishments. Or if they're not lazy about it, they know their accomplishments, they know all the things that they worked on, but they feel they have this attitude of saying, how can I write about my own self? How, listen, your company is actually asking you to do it and you're not doing it. And then don't blame your boss in your company for giving you a bad appraisal, right? Now, I used to have this, I won't name her, but this fan of mine, right? Fantastic employee of mine, who's not there with us anymore. She moved out of the country. But I would love having year-end performance appraisals with her because she used to be so well prepared. So she would do the exact thing that I've mentioned in the first 2 points, right? She would keep an evaluation file through the year. Okay. She would ensure that she's whatever, the self-appraisal form would be filled extremely well with everything. And she would sit there and actually take me through everything that she's done through the year and how she's performed through the year, right? So I had to give her the best appraisal because of course she would do well through the year, she would do a good job through it, but when she would sit down and actually list out exactly what she's done and what kind of an impact it had, it made so much of a difference in her getting the best appraisal. And she worked with us for a really long time, till she got married and moved away, but literally every year she got the best appraisal ever, right? Because of this, the way of doing it. It was a combination of two things: working well through the year and doing well during the meeting, right? So please get hold of this particular form in advance. And you're meant to write about your accomplishment, achievements, how you look at yourself. You're not supposed to keep it blank. I had a person that told me a few days back that my self-rating that I am supposed to give, I keep it blank and I give it to my boss. And I say, sir, aap hi bhar do jo bharna hai. This is the approach. And they think they're doing a good thing by doing it, right? They think they're doing the right thing by saying, sir, boss, aap hi bhar lo, mera kaam aap kar lo, right? It's like, boss, you are supposed to do your boss's work. Now, even your work, what you are supposed to write there, the company's told you to write it there. You're asking your boss to fill it up for you. Wow, yaar, बहुत ही अच्छे कर रहे हो. Yeah, that's like your kid going to the teacher and telling the teacher, मेरी exam आप ही लिख दो. You write it for me, please. Okay, because I'm feeling shy to write about myself. Come on, man. And these are very intelligent people I'm talking about, by the way. This was a discussion I had with somebody a few days back who said this to me. I was shocked to hear that because this guy is a really smart guy otherwise, but just doesn't know how to deal with this performance appraisal, and therefore then unhappy with the kind of job profiles, responsibilities, all the things that you get as a result of that, right? No one else to blame but yourself if you don't do this right. Now, number 3, a part of your preparation is really, okay, is really ensuring that you think about what will your response be if you get a bad review, right? You need to think of all the points, probably problems that had happened through the year, probably negatives that had happened through the year, that if your boss or if your boss, super boss, if both of them are doing the appraisal together with you, that if they bring that up, what is your response going to be, or how are you going to respond to that thing? You need to really give that thing some thought. It cannot be something that you do the last minute, because in every year, if you're working, I'm sure you've done stuff which you're not very happy with. I'm sure you've made mistakes. I'm sure there've been screw ups. I'm sure all those things have happened, right? But ensure that you prepare for how you will respond to that if that thing is brought up, right? And this doesn't mean that you defend yourself for the sake of it. That's not what I'm trying to say. But you need to be ready with the appropriate answers for the things that have gone wrong and for the things that you'd possibly get a bad review for. You also need to think, me understanding my boss and my super boss, like to any areas that I've not done well. You need to think of that in advance and really plan your answers well, right? And this is exactly the person that used to get an amazing appraisal in my office. It's exactly what she would do. She would more or less know, okay, she would more or less what could be the possible things that I could bring up, right? What could I bring up in the discussion that could be her negatives or her red flags, right? Based on our interaction through the year. She would know that, and she would, if I brought those points up, she would have appropriate answers for them. I may not agree with all those answers that she gave, but she was always prepared on the answers to those negative reviews or bad reviews that I would give her, or some feedback point that was there. She would be so well prepared, and that helped the discussion so much, and it made the discussion so robust, enjoyable, and a positive outcome for both of us, right, as a result of that. Now the third point here is, I feel very passionately about this, right? I could go on about each one of these points. The third point here is leverage the recency bias. Right now, listen carefully. If you are a boss conducting reviews or doing appraisals of your subordinates, beware of the recency bias, right? What does the recency bias mean? That if the person has performed well over the last 2-3 months, that is something that remains fresh on a person's mind, right? So if your appraisals are in, say, the month of April, and the last quarter of the year, if a person is performed in an outstanding way before the appraisal, that always is fresh in your boss's mind. And very often, your appraisals tend to happen based on the recency effect, right? This is the reality. This is the reality of the situation. So if you're a leader conducting this thing, beware of the recency bias, right? Because you can't just judge or appraise people based on their performance in the last months, 2 months, 3 months of the year. You need to be able to judge their performance based on the 12 months that they put in, the whole year. But the recency bias is a reality, right? What do I mean by a reality? Whether you like it or not, people tend to judge you that way. So while you need to deliver a great performance throughout the year, pull up your socks all the more. Pull up your socks all the more during the last month, last 2 months, last 3 months before your appraisal, right? Because if you pull up your socks much more, that is likely to be very fresh in your boss's head. And it's likely to give you a better result if you do that, right? This seems like a little secret, but you know that this is how things pan out in reality. There's a very nice quote that says, deal with the world, not like you would like it, but as the world is, right? Deal with the world, not as you would like it, and as the world is. And the world is, fortunately or unfortunately, in a way where the recency bias plays a huge, huge role. Okay. I'm a big cricket fan, so I give an example of saying that you remember Dhoni's innings in the final, and the last 6 that he hit in the final, that when India won the World Cup. Nobody is going to remember how he played during that World Cup, right? How did he play in the league matches? Nobody is going to remember. The last thing that happened, he scored a 6 there. If you remember, he wasn't doing very well during that World Cup. But everything changes, my friends. Everything changes based on that last thing that you remember about that person. And of course, that last visual that you remember of the World Cup is him hitting that 6. So the rest of the performance doesn't make a difference after that, right? So the recency bias is a real thing, and you must keep this in mind. Okay. If you understood these 3 points of what I'm trying to say, give me a big yes in the chat box if you understood what it means. Okay, come on, let's go to the next one. Thank you. Thank you very much, my lovely audience. Thank you. Okay, now we have 5 points here during the performance appraisal. Okay, now during the, okay, this is again very important, very, very important. Before I get started with these points, okay, please listen to me carefully, guys. This is an important discussion, okay? You and your boss throughout the year will be occupied with operational activities, which basically means your day-to-day work, right? That's what you're going to be occupied with. Even the feedback that your boss will give you during the year, more often than not, my friends, will revolve. What will it revolve around? It will revolve around task related feedback that is given to you. Very rarely do you end up having a discussion with your boss on the broader aspects of what he expects from you, what is the, you know, what is the specific feedback that he has. Those discussions, whether you like it or not, rarely end up happening in a year, right? They just don't end up happening. This is the reality of the situation, unfortunately. In my organization as well, it's the same reality. However much I would like to actually sit people down and have like longer discussions with them on what is expected from them, what is their overall feedback. You know, your day-to-day activities take so much of your time that you don't get the time to do it. Now, your performance appraisal meeting is that one meeting where you need to make this a real dialogue between you and your manager. It is not supposed to be a one-way street. It is supposed to be a dialogue between you and them, where you actually understand what they expect from you, what their feedback is, what their KPIs, all these things you need to do. So there are two broad paths, if you ask me, right, of a performance appraisal. Number one is getting an understanding from your boss of their expectations, of their feedback, of their goals that they're going to set from you. And the second part of this performance appraisal is you actually talking about the past year that is gone by, and what have you done well and what have you not done well, right? So broadly, these are the two kind of elements that we need to keep in mind: the understanding and you talking about what was done well. And both these things put together is the performance appraisal in a way that will happen, right? So ensure that you get your manager's feedback input on the following things, which is, what do you think went well in the year? What can I do to improve my rating in this, in whatever that area, the next year? What can I do to be more helpful to people on my team? How can I make your job easier? You need to ask these very direct questions to your manager. Again, I keep talking on this forum and otherwise, we are so not used to speaking directly with people. We are so not used to actually having a direct conversation. And you know, the best kind of appraisal sessions that I have had, where I have been the boss and somebody is done the discussion well, is where people actually ask me very simple questions, right? Of saying that I want the best appraisal next year. I want a 5 on 5 next year. I want to be the top 10 performer in my thing next year. Please tell me exactly what you expect from me. That will help me get that 5 on 5. Okay, because that is what I want. Very clear. And when a person communicates that clearly, it becomes very easy for me as their boss to actually tell them, saying, "Bhai, बहन तेरे को ये करना है. If you do well on these parameters, that will help you get a 5 on 5, right? This is exactly what you need to do." And I had so many of my team members actually write them down on your notepad, then reconfirm it, saying, "So, okay, Swapnil, what you're saying is, if I deliver this for me, you will give me this rating, and in turn, possibly this increment that I'm looking for. This is what I want." Right? So what do I need to do? And that direct conversation or dialogue between you and your boss is exactly what you need to do during this meeting. But we don't tend to ask these questions, right? So ask the questions, get their input, feedback on what do you think went well, What do I need to improve, right? What can I do to improve my ratings? What else can I do on the team? How else can I make your job easier? And don't just listen without making notes. This is not a conversation that you're having in the garden. This is not a conversation that you're having with your friends. This is a serious discussion. I hope some note taking is happening there, right? So ensure that that is the case in the way you deal with it. Now, two, when I told you that be prepared with possible responses, stuff that you have wrong during the year, or things that have prepared your responses to that. But ensure that you acknowledge the mistakes that you spotted, that you acknowledge mistakes that are made, and demonstrate openness towards feedback on the various domains. Right? What could those various domains be in which you're expecting feedback? It could be general, it could be task related feedback, it could be your parameters, general, task, or behavior based feedback, but truly demonstrate kind of acknowledge your mistakes and demonstrate openness towards it. There's a very nice quote that says it takes courage to stand up and speak, but it also takes courage to sit down and listen, right? So during this thing, this is not the time where you just defend yourself for the sake of defending yourself. No, 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 no. That's a wrong thing to do, right? You will get into large, long debates and arguments with your boss if you just try to defend yourself for no reason. No, this is not the time to do it. Have the courage to sit down and listen and acknowledge your mistakes and demonstrate openness towards the feedback that is there, right? So you need to, first of all, get input on all these things from your boss. Now, the other things to do, the other 3, 4, 5 points to do, right, is ensure that you mutually agree on the new key performance indicators, KPIs, goals for the next 3, 6, 12 months, right? Again, you need to have a proper discussion on this. Just by the way, for me to tell you, when people typically in the organizational pyramid, people at the top, right? Because there's a CEO, and then the CEO is having a discussion with his people down, right? So these are very, very senior people that he's having a discussion with. This is the way that a performance appraisal happens. Sometimes that performance appraisal takes 1 day, 2 days, right? This is the way it happens, where they're actually discussing a lot of different issues, but they will mutually agree and decide on what those KPIs are or what those goals are for the next 3, 6, 12 months. If the subordinate has a certain amount of disagreement on what those goals should be, right? Now, what do subordinates typically do? They do not voice their disagreement to their boss, but they will go home and voice their disagreement to their spouse that can do nothing about it. They'll talk to their spouse or friends about why the goals are not correct or KPIs, but the people that you're supposed to talk to, you don't talk to them. Okay, now, if your goal is set at 150, when you know 150 is not possible, right? And you have a discussion and you explain why 150 as a goal is not possible and bring it down to 125, for example, and you mutually agree that 125 rupees is the new goal. Then if you go about doing 140, you're a real superstar, no? Right? Instead of that 150, somebody says you just keep quiet and you don't really put your view forward on what it is. Then if your target is 150 and you do 140, then you underachieve, no, on that, right? So whether you overachieved or underachieved, more often than not, also depends on the discussion that you have on setting up of these targets. And I understand, guys, I understand that in a lot of cases you may have very little say in it, or you may have, or you could say in a way that these things are fixed, right? But in my experience, you know, having that discussion, right, with them is very important. So Pratyush has a say that it's a discussion doesn't take place, it comes from the top. Okay, you're true, a lot of things in large organizations are watered down, but over my almost 12 years, right, of doing this thing, I can assure you that if you think that a certain goal is not the right thing, and enough of you and your colleagues actually express your opinion on that, In a lot of cases, you will compel your kind of management to kind of think of those things. And I have seen enough and more cases of even that happening, right? So what am I trying to say to you? I'm trying to say to you that if you get a target, and if you know, if you're not in agreement with that particular goal that has been set up for the quarter, 6 months, 12 months, don't just keep quiet and nod your head and talk about it with your spouse and everybody else. Ensure that you have the guts and courage to at least speak out your mind to your boss, saying that I am not in agreement. Try to understand their logic towards it, right? Or another way could be that, okay, if you still think 150 is, I believe 125 is what it should be, the target. If you still believe it's 150, I will need a few resources to make that happen. And these are the probably resources that I would require, right? So, but you need to have some discussion there. And we don't have the discussion there, right? We just do not discuss stuff directly because we're either used to keeping our mouth shut, okay, or not doing anything. We're just used to doing that, or we get too upset about stuff, right? One of the two things is what we're doing. And what we need to do is tread a middle path towards it, okay? Now, once you've made your evaluation file that you're going to make, your evaluation file that you're going to keep, and you're going to carry that evaluation file to the discussion that you're going to have, do not shy away. Do not shy away from communicate your achievements to your seniors and really highlight instances where you have performed and the positive effect that has had, right? A lot of people can't do this under the kind of logic of saying, "Arey, main khud ke bare mein kya bolu," right? They don't put it on the form. They don't really communicate what has been, what they've achieved through the years. It's one of the two things. They don't really remember because they don't have the form. They don't carry the evaluation file with them. On the other side, even if they have it, they don't express it to them, right? And both things are bad. And the last thing that you need to do during your performance appraisal is, of course, share your career plans. Do not expect your boss, super boss, or management to dream about your career plans and what you want to do. If you want to do certain things within the organization, you need to tell the setup that you're in, not once, but possibly 1,000,000 times before something will actually end up happening. हमें लगता है कि एक बार मैंने मेरे बॉस को बोल दिया, अब बॉस ने सोचना चाहिए उसके बारे में. No, people are so busy thinking about themselves, they don't have time to think about what your career plans are. Your career plans need to be important to you. If your career plans are important to you, you need to have the courage to repeatedly go up to the stakeholders that can make something happen and make it happen. Do not expect stuff to happen just because it comes out of your mouth one fine day and you told that to your boss, and now your boss hasn't done anything about it, and now you're going to grudge him for that, right? For not doing anything. That's an absolutely wrong approach to take, right? You need to ensure that you can actually power your way through. And yes, follow up. Pratyush has put follow up is important. Follow up is everything, right? Nothing ever happens without you being amazing at following up. And till when are you supposed to follow up? Till your task gets done, or till you meet your goal of what you want, right? Till your goal, you are supposed to follow up with the required stakeholders and follow up in a good way, right? You don't want to follow up in a way that irritates people. So you want to do that. You want to follow up in a very tactful way. And maybe in some other sessions, I'll tell you what tactful means and how you can go about following up. Or if somebody asks a question in Q&A, I can probably take it up there, right? But that following up is very important. And most people feel, but I told my boss about it. He didn't do anything about it. Your boss is busy with his headache. Yeah, he's not busy with what your career plans are. There's nothing wrong with it. You yourself don't take your career plan seriously. What is your boss going to take your career plan seriously? Boss बोलेगा पिछले साल इसको ट्रेनर बनना था, अब उसको सेल्स में जाना है. पहले तुम तो डिसाइड करो तुझे क्या करना है. तुम खुद ही डिसाइड नहीं कर पाते तुम्हें क्या करना है, right? Now when you follow up with him 10 times on it, or your management 10 times with it, then they know, bhai ye serious hai, this guy is serious about this plan. Now if he's a valuable resource, we need to make something happen for it, right? So that is the way you need to kind of get your way through, by sharing your career plans and in turn following up on your career plans. Do not expect anybody else to kind of take them seriously or do anything about it, which unless you do what it takes right? So that is something which is important. Okay, so let's quickly recap what you're supposed to do during the performance appraisal, right? During the actual meeting. We discussed what you're supposed to do. To start with, how are you going to, before you are going to self-evaluate yourself every month, you are going to be your own boss, you are going to be your own leader, right? It's like you're going to be two people. You're going to be the leader, you're going to be the subordinate. You're going to self-evaluate yourself every month, month on month, to see what you're doing, how you're doing. Number two, you're going to prepare very well for the meeting. That's something which is very important. And number three, you're going to take care of recency bias. Here, what are you going to do? You are going to know and remember that this performance appraisal is the one time that you can have a larger discussion with your boss, because whether you like it or not, on a day-to-day basis, we're caught up with operational jobs. We're caught up by just keeping the system running. So neither our boss nor us have the time to have these larger discussions. So you need to really make the time for it. By the way, just to tell you, right, if you're never be in a hurry during your performance appraisal, and if your boss is in a hurry, right, please get a time slot for him where you have a substantial amount of time to have a discussion, right? I would say a minimum of 2 to 3 hours at least of a discussion, at least 2 to 3 hours. Needs to be the case. A lot of times they get over very, very quickly, but ensure that you tell your boss that, listen, I need this much time because we don't get to talk during the year otherwise, right? And I want to handle your expectations. I want to put my expectations on the table, have a larger discussion. So ensure that you block in both your and your boss's calendar the appropriate amount of time, anything between 2 to 3 hours, right? Secondly, if you're not done during that 2 to 3 hours, don't rush this discussion up. If you need to sit another time with them, please sit on another session with them, right? And just trust me on this thing. In my office, sometimes it would be a joke, because a lot of these performance appraisals, because they happen just once a year, would go on for so long. But I would say as a leader that they're very, very important, because I don't get to spend time with my team otherwise. So even if it's going to take a whole 6 hours, I'm ready to spend those 6 hours with that person, both ends, because I want to share certain feedback. I want to get feedback from them, and they would go really long. But again, once a year, got to do it. So block your boss's time there, right? Get your manager's input on what are things you need that went well. Where do you need to improve? What else can you do to make his job easier? Acknowledge your mistakes, demonstrate openness towards feedback. Okay, now mutually agree on the key performance indicators. And the reason why I put mutually agree is, if that you don't agree on that, don't just keep quiet. Have a discussion on those things, right? You need to know that if your boss, in the end, I told you, if the target is 150, you negotiated down to 125, then you 140, you're a star. The target is 150, you don't negotiate for it, you get to 140, you have missed your target, right? You need to pay, and of course you need to remember, right, that try to karo, right? Ensure that you're trying. That's the least that you can do, right? Where in this kind of a situation, you can actually ensure that you try your best, so that you know for sure that that target that has been set cannot be negotiated, right? You know that it cannot be negotiated. So then you're happy saying, मैंने try to kar di meeting mein to bring this thing down or do whatever is required, right? Assertively communicate your achievements. Do not be shy around this thing, and share your career plans, whatever you want to do. Don't expect your boss to guess them. Right now, after the performance appraisal, not much here, but this is what you need to do, right? This is like the cycle gets completed. At the end of the performance appraisal, ensure that you demonstrate gratitude, right? It's very important to demonstrate gratitude and tell your boss that you are happy with whatever, you're grateful for whatever feedback that you've got, good, bad, ugly, it doesn't matter, right? Because getting just honest feedback, even if you don't agree with it, but just getting honest feedback from your boss's point of view is very important for you to kind of improve yourself. Focus on the takeaways, not the criticism, right? I love this quote by Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has this quote where she says, don't take feedback personally, take feedback seriously. Okay, what a nice use of words. Don't take feedback personally, take feedback seriously, right? So this is exactly what it is. So really focus on the takeaways. on the stuff that you need to take and start doing differently for you to get a different results, right? Do not focus on, Arey, how could my boss say this to me? This is very hurtful. Don't focus on all those things. Focus on the takeaways, because in the end, what you want to take that appraisal, that discussion, and improve your performance the next year so that you can do even better next year, right? For you and your family. That's what you want. So don't take that criticism personally. Take it seriously, okay? And now this is the next thing. Now that you have done this, one of the important things to do, proactively communicate progress, my friends. Do not wait for your next review to highlight your performance on the KPIs and goals which are there, right? So the people, we keep talking about perception management, right? We keep talking about perception management, and there are just very simple things that you need to do as a part of perception management, right? And we've shared a lot of that in our class already. But just here, what is, if you do something well, I'll give you an example, right? If you have a small team that reports into you, and something is done well, put an email to all the stakeholders talking not about how you did something well, but you talk about how your team along with you did something well, right? So it doesn't seem like aap khud ki badai kar rahe ho, or it doesn't seem like you're writing a mail just to like show off about something. You need to be tactful when you're doing that, right? So what do you say? You say, okay, you know what? These are all the things that our team has achieved. And of course, as a part of the team, you get the credit as well to it, right? So ensure that now through the next year, you are proactively communicating the progress that you're making on different things. If you had specific discussions around stuff where you need to improve, right, where your boss has told you that you need to improve, ensure that you're proactively informing them about the improvement that is happening on those areas, right? So listen, your progress needs to be important to you. If your progress is not important to you, who else will it be important to? You need to take your own progress seriously. If you don't take your progress seriously, who else is going to take it seriously for you? You expect your boss to take it seriously for you? No, your boss is not going to take it seriously. He's busy taking his own progress, right? So you need to take, now if you're not going to communicate proactively your progress, improvement on all these things, how is your boss going to have the right perception about you then, if that's not the case? So you need to do it. You need to do it in subtle ways. You need to do it in tactful ways. You need to do it in smart ways. But ladies and gentlemen, you need to do it, right? Okay, that's something which is important.